It's all about getting fitter with the lungs that you have. So, like you can do taglines like, breathe better, feel good, do more, which is something trying to positively sell. The very thing that most people don't want to do when you get breathless is exercise. So it's actually not that bad. However, so let me just talk. Has anyone here been through a pulmonary rehab program? Oh. Great. Right, so we can have a bit of an interactive session, because I think once I've finished, I'm going to be handing over to people, Leanne, how do they actually fit exercise into their life, because it's very individual for all of us. So what is pulmonary rehab, for those for you that don't know? Safe to say that it's pretty much had its feet very firmly based in a group of patients who've got something called COPD. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So that's where the bulk of the research and the evidence has come from to say that it's a really good idea. However, there is much more evidence now coming through in the other group of restrictive diseases, if you like, where it's lumped together and has actually benefits in there too. So you hear a lot about COPD, but don't be put off. It does actually work for other conditions as well. And it's a self-management program, and it combines exercise and education over usually twice a week for 6 weeks. And you do get homework, unfortunately, so you're expected to do a little bit more as well. And the aim is to improve your fitness. And the way I try and sell it to people is like saying, we need to use your lungs to the best capacity that they can be to get you as fit as you can possibly be with the lungs that you have, as opposed to reaching for the sky and feeling that you're never going to actually get there. So it's very individualised to your ability. And I say to people, if you get breathless and you don't do very much, your body starts to weaken, like it would naturally do. And then if you want to do something, you can't, because you're weaker as well. And so the weakness and the physical ability of your body to exercise also has a significant impact on what you can do. So the less you do, the less you can do. The education part is again around how do you manage your condition and the knowledge and the actual ability for you to be able to do as best as you can. And it has been shown to change the ability for you to walk and do things that we can measure to say that you're physically better. Quality of life measurements, which are all questionnaire based. It's not always the best thing, but it's certainly been proven that it's effective. So they've done a lot of research on it. It's been around for very many years now. It needs more funding and more prevalence. However, it's been very evidence-based in things, as I say, that's not COPD related. And who should we do it through? I'll go through that a little bit more. But essentially, I've put in yellow improving quadriceps strength, because actually as a single marker of well-being, strength in your quadriceps muscles is pretty important, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. Again, and guess what? You actually have your own trial, which I found last night as I was busy Googling my presentation, from Brazil, but in only a couple of years ago. About 40 patients were put into pulmonary rehabilitation. It's all very slightly different when you look at different areas around the world as to what they call pulmonary rehabilitation. This was exercising on treadmills and doing some strength exercises. But guess what? It works. So again, gathering evidence base to actually support exercise is good, even if you feel that you have a breathing problem. So who? Well, as I've said before, any chronic respiratory disease whose main component is functional breathlessness. And that's the important bit, is do you feel more breathless than you feel you should and therefore are limited in what you can do? You therefore qualify to be considered for pulmonary rehabilitation. We've already talked a bit about the MRC scale, but this is exactly what that is. Essentially, it's levels of breathlessness. One is probably... Well, I'm probably 2, actually, I think. So number 1 is not troubled by breathlessness, except on strenuous exercise. 2 is getting breathless walking up a hill. 3 is on the flat. 4 is keeping up with your friends. And 5 is not really being able to get out of the house that much. So reasonably obvious functional levels, which help us in the whole medical world to categorise breathlessness. So as far as getting onto a pulmonary rehab program, you need to have a diagnosis, medically optimised, various obvious things. Can you walk 10 metres independently? Can you carry out exercises independently? Are you motivated to come? And the other thing is, can you actually get there? Because a lot of these places don't put on transport, so it's actually whether you can physically get on the 2 buses twice a week. Takes you 5 hours to do a pulmonary rehab program. Those sorts of things actually are very important and why people don't come. So as I said, what it is it's exercise classes plus education. Everyone focuses on the exercise. I am a physio, so I'm probably going to talk about that a bit more. But it's a combined thing. So it's not just always about the exercise. There's a lot of other stuff going on in pulmonary rehab as to why it's so successful. But it's twice a week, typically for 6 weeks, as I said. And the way that I approach it, and the way that we probably should be approaching it, is it's an aerobic exercise program and strength. We used to kind of do like a circuit thing, whereas now we've changed our program into being 20 minutes of continuous aerobic exercise. Now, that's not saying that you're constantly pounding for 20 minutes, but 20 minutes of the program is focused on trying to do as much aerobic together as possible, as opposed to splitting it up. We do hammer the quads, I'd be fair to say, because that's actually quite a key feature in lots of things. I'll go into that slide in a second. Endurance, so stamina and strength, we want there. It is individualised to your own ability, so don't feel that you're not going to be capable. It's totally meant to be bespoke to you and your ability. And you progress. So the 6 weeks is pushing you through to get more and more challenged and therefore improve. There's usually about 1 staff member to 8 patients in the group. So again, that's why you need to be independent in how you can do things. And the main thing is being breathless is okay. It's normal for exercise. The degree of breathlessness and how you focus that into your program is the individual part. But don't be frightened just because you get a bit breathless when you are exercising. We talk about how to cope with breathlessness a lot. This is all the education. This is the ongoing support in the classes. It is not competitive. We don't set you up to kind of, do walking races with each other. And you do not have to have fancy kit. Certainly not in my programs anyway. So this is typically an exercise sheet that I would have in my pulmonary rehab class. Now, as you can see on this side here is all the aerobic bits. We have walking, step-ups and marching. No kit there, no exercise bikes, no treadmills, no nothing. This is totally homeable, okay? On the other side, which is our strengthening component, we've got your things very obvious, leg extensions, quads, biceps, sit to stand, quads, wall pushes, and side leg raises, balance. So totally doable at home, nothing fancy, and it works. How hard do I push you? Probably harder than you may think, but not as hard as it's going to be awful, okay? So this is a typical, there's other scales. There's the Borg scale, which is very common, which is a grade of 0 to 10, with descriptive words saying how breathless are you. I don't particularly like it. I don't think it's normal language. Certainly not for people to say I'm somewhat breathless, which is, I don't think I've probably ever used that word in my life, but anyway. So something here gives you a bit of an idea. So between 4 and 6, light to moderate activity. Number 6, moderate sweating, but able to speak, okay? As opposed to 10, can't push any harder, probably can't speak, really. Okay, so somewhere in the middle here, a little bit of an effort. So what I tend to say to people is you're working at the right level. If when I come up and have a chat with you, you talk to me in 2 or 3 words at a time, but that's okay. That's okay. That level of breathlessness. If you can't speak, I'll slow you down. If you're chatting, I'm going to push you, okay? So just an idea of how you do this at home is very practical. If you know that that's the level you need to be working at, that's what you work at, okay? And it's a bit of self-regulation of how you get there. So it's not all technical exercise. Some of it's very common sense. So this is a typical programme. I'm lucky enough to have the most enormous hall in the world, actually, over in Ealing. I don't work there now. I've actually left and work in West Hertfordshire, but this was in Ealing. And so this is my typical programme on that list that you saw. So I've got my marching on the spot. I've got my step-ups over here. We literally had timers, counters, right, go, 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 push, 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 walking. And here's some of the strengthening exercises and things like that. But typically, that's the sort of class makeup in my programmes that would be a pulmonary rehab class. So this is the thing of why should I exercise if I can't breathe? We all need to exercise. I mean, everything is pushing exercise these days, and actually there's a good reason for that. We're to remain strong, healthy, and have stamina. Very important. And it is true. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And that is contributory on top of the lung condition that you have. So when I say to people, if I gave you, and in LAM it's potentially in some people true, if I gave you a lung transplant, you'll be just as breathless afterwards at the beginning, because you are so deconditioned, having had such severe problems with your lungs, that you are equally as breathless walking up a flight of stairs, because now you've got to get fit again. Okay, so prehabilitation for transplant and post-rehabilitation for transplant is incredibly important, because you need to keep your body as physically strong as you can. Your muscles are the same as everybody else's. You can make them fitter, even if you do have chronic lung problems. Exercise is safe if you're breathless. As I say, sitting down and being scared to exercise means you lose your fitness very quickly, and I do see that fear in people with breathing problems, and part of pulmonary rehab is addressing the fear. So as much as I give you exercises to do, because we're in the room saying, you're fine, do a bit more, see, look, you're okay, that kind of positive reinforcement is actually part of how do you address the breathlessness factor. As I said, unfit people, I can speak for myself, get very breathless doing things, and I could be better. And I've talked about the lung transplant side of things. So I'm selling pulmonary rehab to you. So now that's the first exercise bit. Well, what about the education? It is 50% of pulmonary rehab, and this is a bit that sometimes doesn't get sold enough, but actually is sometimes equally, if not more important, because it's where everyone gets to talk about it. Everyone gets to understand it. If you've actually got 2 classes a week for 6 weeks, they're 2 hours long. 1 hour is for exercise, typically. 1 hour is for education. One topic at a time. You have a whole hour to talk about what's wrong with my lungs. You have a whole hour to talk about breathlessness strategies. You have a whole hour to talk about phlegm. You have a whole... Oh, great. You have a whole hour to talk about nutrition and diet. And there's a multidisciplinary team, all with specialities, coming to talk to you about this stuff. And you can sit there and you can ask any question you like. And you never normally get that length of time. Normally with the hospital system, you're in and out, aren't you? 15 minutes, you're gone. So something like this is actually sometimes the first time people ever say, I now understand what's wrong with me. I've been in the NHS for 10 years and I've never quite got it until I actually came here, because we have the time. And all of these topics would be a typical programme. So what's wrong with my lungs, breathlessness, talked about that. Stress and anxiety, major factor in breathlessness management, huge. Can't underplay that enough, really. Sputum diet, why exercise? I call it sex, death and other unmentionables. But, we get a bit of a laugh and a bit of a when we do that talk. But anyway, what are all the tests for? Explaining all the tests. Why are they doing what they're doing? Oxygen. So as I say, it's an all-round comprehensive programme. So sitting in small groups, typically you might have maybe 10 to 15 people on a good day at a class. They stay with you. Some types have what they call a rolling programme, new people in, old people out each week. That would fry my brain. Some people stay together for the entire 6 weeks, but because people drop out, there'll be less of you at the end than at the beginning. We tend to do what we call a crossover program, which is there's 2 groups that start. One starts week 1. By week 4, the other one starts. By week 6, the first one finishes. The other group starts. So you cross over. So you still have the same group of people. You get the group hug effect of knowing people, but we actually get efficiency in the classes by crossing over halfway through with another group. So how do we measure success? Typically, it's a bit dry. We get you walking. We measure it before and after, and we hope we get you better. And we do quality of life questionnaires, which are the big ones. There's a variety out there, but they're questionnaire based. And this is the sort of like the core underpinning success that's published around pulmonary rehab, because it affects both of those in a positive way. So this would be a typical walking test. Got cones, walk up and down. Someone with a clipboard measures what you can do. This is the CAT question. Excuse me, the CAT questionnaire, which is for COPD, but it's a symptom burden, to be honest. It's not really a quality of life questionnaire, but this would be the typical kind of thing, and it's popular because it's quick and easy. I'm going to talk briefly about oxygen purely because it does have an impact. And some of you may have experience of it, some of you won't, but I do tend to have a lot of oxygen assessments in my groups and classes, so I'm happy to take any questions about that. But there's 2 different types of oxygen. Oxygen that you need continuously, based on a blood gas, which is a blood test from the radial artery, very scientific, very planned, and then walkabout oxygen, which is for people who desaturate, so lose oxygen when they're walking around. And that's a bit art and sciencey, to be fair. A little bit of science, quite a lot of art in that one. So for people who need ambulatory oxygen to help them walk further, it needs to do exactly that. It needs to help you walk further. So one of the big outcomes is, does this make a difference? Do you walk further with it than without it? And people who have quite extensive lung damage can result in needing quite high, what we call flow rates of oxygen. So when you're sitting still, if you need 1 litre to keep your oxygen levels where they need to be, guaranteed you'll need a lot more than that when you're walking around. So if you need things, and certainly with the lady I was involved with LAM, you'd need quite high flow rates. And then what's the sort of equipment that will keep up with that? This is where the arty bit comes in. I can do the walking test, that's the science-ish, but I need then to say, so what are you going to do? How long are you going to be out of the house? What sort of life do you lead? Can you carry it? Can't you carry it? How many times are you going to get refills? Blah, 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 blah. So then you start talking the life questions, and that also filters into what sort of equipment would be good for you. So standard cylinders, the typical thing, have a variety of flow rates. They're quite good for going up high, but they don't last very long. You need to order them frequently. They're heavy, no getting away from that really. So multiple visits from the oxygen company, which ties you into a lot of that thing. Liquid oxygen, a bit more funky. Certainly can go up quite high. You can get pulse, but in people with interstitial lung disease categories, I don't think that's particularly very helpful. I'm not going to go into that because I know that's not my talk, but there's a huge variety of oxygen type equipment on the market. Some would be suitable, some probably not quite so suitable. So what is pulmonary rehab? It's actually quite good fun, or it should be, otherwise you need to change classes. You're meant to enjoy yourself. That's the whole point of coming. You get to have a group of people that you're working with. It's 26 hours of face-to-face contact, which is a pretty huge chunk of healthcare professionals' time when you're looking at helping you manage your condition. So you have an hour assessment, you have an hour reassessment, and then you have 2 hours twice a week for 6 weeks. So, as I say, you're having a peer group thing because you've got a group of people that you're going through this with. Some of them may well be older than you. If we're talking the majority of COPD patients, that may put you off. There are alternatives to a standard class. You can do sort of, now they're trying to be a little bit more IT funky friendly with certainly a younger population coming through. So there's pulmonary rehab on a sort of a remote level. There's manuals, a space manual that's come out of the pulmonary rehab mecca in Sally Singh land. But essentially there's various ways that you can actually do pulmonary rehab in a different way. There are apps, but as I say, there's a My COPD app that's very focused on COPD, unfortunately, which won't always address some of your issues. But they are trying to spread it out a little bit, make it a lot more accessible for yourselves. And the results that we get are, as I said, sometimes the drugs would dream of getting the results that pulmonary rehab actually do achieve. So don't dismiss something as simple as exercise, because it is actually incredibly good for you. Thank you.
Well, I've been on oxygen for 12 years, 11 years, somewhere around about that. My daughter was 14. She's now 27, isn't she? Yeah. So you can work that out. I just used to teach maths. I'm no good at it. I had 2 sessions of pulmonary rehab, and ours was slightly different to yours. And in some places, you really struggle to get on it if you don't have COPD. They're not interested. But I'd had one session that I nagged because we'd had a session here, I think, saying about pulmonary rehab. And so I went back to my doctor and said, I want pulmonary rehab. I had to stamp my feet quite a lot, and eventually I got it. And then I had another lung biopsy, open chest surgery, and I was in bed for a week. And so when I came out from there, I went straight back to my doctor and said, I need pulmonary rehab. So I went back to another session. But exercise generally with oxygen, I used to do aquarobics because you can't swim with it because it won't follow you. Aquarobics, you're roughly in the same place. The place we did this at the sports centre, the kids used to come in for their swimming lessons, and so they had those plastic trays, you know, that they have in school for putting their work in and things. They had a whole load of those. So I used to swipe one of them, put my oxygen in it on the side of the pool, and put my longest tube on and do my aquarobics next to the edge. My daughter has some photographs. I think they have appeared in lampposts, but hopefully they've not been reproduced since. So that was quite good. The only problem was I had longer hair then, and I kept getting colds all through the winter because I was going out with wet hair and damp hair because the changing rooms were geared up for the school groups. They weren't really geared up for people who needed to dry their hair properly before they went outside, and I was always in too much of a hurry anyway. So I gave up that one. I now belong to a gym, and I go and have personal training every week, and we adapt the exercises to what I can do, and they do push me because I know that I have to get breathless and keep going. I did a session when we were on the Doxy trial, I think, when Will was still here. I was thinking that I was getting more breathless doing pulmonary rehab. And so I had a 24-hour monitor, SATS monitor, from Simon. And when he assessed it, he said, yep, you should be okay, but just switch your oxygen up a bit while you're exercising, which is what I do. So I go to the gym, I turn my oxygen up, I put my Fitbit on, and off we go. They do things at our gym called a doc spot, which is for people who you have to be referred by the doctor, but for people who want individual help. I mean, it's all sorts of people, from people with broken legs, people with replacement hips, people with, generally unfit. The doctor has said it would do you good to exercise, and they do a session. I've forgotten how many weeks it is, but they do that. But no, I go to the gym first thing in the morning before my brain wakes up and says, "What are you doing here, you stupid woman?" If I leave it till later in the day, there's no way I'm going back to the gym. So I get up and I go to the gym. The other thing that I wrote down was about locks. This is liquid oxygen. It's left over from last night because they couldn't work out how to deliver it to this hotel. But I've got a cylinder over there. I have tried to exercise with the cylinder. It's heavy. It's really hard work. But liquid, if you're on liquid, it's a lot easier. It does. If I jump around with this on, it freezes up. So, but you can put it on the floor and dance around it like it's your handbag. It works. I think that was about it. Yeah.
Just going to hold it to stabilise. Hi, those of you that don't know me, my name's Lisa. And despite multiple lung collapses back in 2002, 2003, I wasn't actually formally diagnosed with LAM until a fifth lung collapse in 2013. After my original lung collapses, I've always been really sporty at school and my adult life, but after 4 operations on my lungs, my exercise probably plateaued, and I just assumed it was because I'd had pleurodesive, so my lungs weren't working properly. And then when I had my fifth lung collapse, they did a CT scan, and they said, yeah, you've got LAM. And that kind of made sense. It was a bit of a blow to me, having always been fit, but it made sense why I couldn't actually get any fitter than I'd reached my plateau. So not going to be beaten by it. I was diagnosed, I had an operation in November 12 for my last lung collapse, formally diagnosed in April 13. And I thought, right, June 2013, I rode London to Cambridge to raise money for LAM Action. So I was determined not to be beaten by it. But being diagnosed with LAM, it just made sense to me then. I was getting out of breath on exertion. And I knew why, but it wasn't going to beat me. I was quite lucky in that I was stable for a number of years, so I could continue to go to the gym, do high-impact aerobics, spin classes, always been a keen cyclist as well. But then I started to decline a little bit. And I noticed this, and I always remember probably one of my early conversations with Simon. I went to Simon, I said, something's not right. I tried to go whitewater rafting, and I couldn't pass the swim test. And I said, a year ago I could do that, and I could do it. So I couldn't pass the swim test. I had to be rescued. I ended up on a nebuliser, and Simon just put his head in his hands and said, don't do extreme sports. Just realise you can't. So I was like, okay, hate to admit it, but you're probably right, Simon. So I kind of avoided those and continued to still go down to the gym, doing the high-impact aerobics. And then I noticed a little bit more of a decline, and then I started on rapamycin in February 2017. I decided, well, in the gym, we used to be able to get heart rate monitors, and so I thought, yeah, that's great, I'll have one of those as a good motivational. But actually, I'm a little bit too competitive. And another conversation with Simon, when I was moaning that I couldn't keep up with my peers, he was just saying, just don't. He puts his head in his hands, and I know I've done something wrong then. Just don't try to do it. So cycling was always my thing and is always my thing, and I always saw that would be the last thing I ever gave up. So I can't do high impact aerobics now because as much as I was stopping before and using my reliever inhaler, it was just getting too much and I actually wasn't enjoying it. It was becoming more of a chore. So I kept with the cycling, and I used to judge how good I was at cycling by going up hills. How many times did I need to stop to go up a hill? And when it got to about 7 on one particular hill, I just thought, this isn't it. I can't do this anymore. And at the time, so we went out and bought an electric bike. And I dug my heels in that I wouldn't want an electric bike. I don't need an electric bike. What do I need that for? But I realised, yeah, probably I did. And it was probably one of the best things I ever did. And I got Julie on board with us as well. So Julie's got her electric bike. And now it's brilliant. I can go up hills, and if I get out of breath, when I feel like I'm getting out of breath, I press my superpower button and off I whiz. And it's great. You have these sweaty men in their road bikes sweating up a hill, and we just whiz past them. And it's just, what's the problem? It's all fine. So I can continue to do that. I don't do high-impact aerobics anymore, so I actually do a more gym workout and more strengthening and on the quads, trying to keep that going. And recently, again, I've started to do a body pump class, and those of you that may or may not know it, it's basically a choreographed class, and you do weights, so you do biceps for 5 minutes, you do legs for 5 minutes. And I did it, and I was thinking, I can't use heavy weights, because there's a little bit of cardio involved as well. And I thought, I can't use heavy weights, this is really annoying me. I'm still using the really light weights. Again, went to see Simon, had a little bit of a moan. Simon's response was, yeah, I know about body pump. I did it a week before with my daughter. I couldn't walk. So I thought, which again made me feel a lot better. So I guess for me, what I've had to do, I've had to come from probably being exercising up here to being here. But actually, I know what I can do now. I do push myself. I do panic when I get out of breath. I can't lie. I've had a few asthma type attacks, which scared me. But Simon, again, has done my walk test and said, look, you can do it. So I'm out there doing it. So, I exercise at a level I'm comfortable with. I always have my inhaler to hand. I never compare myself to anyone now. And actually, if I don't feel like exercising one night, I don't. I sit on the sofa, gin and tonic. It's less calories than a banana. What's wrong with that? So you've just got to do what you can do and just don't feel threatened by other people and what other people are doing around you. It's you. We're all different, so...